What's up guys, Cash back with another video, and I know things feel like they're kinda up in the air for the game's future after recent rumors of the game potentially shutting down this year, and players who just want the game to continue getting updates are looking for a lifeline at this point. And while it may be a few weeks before we get any concrete news on the team's plan for the game to start the year, since they're just getting back from holiday break, I do have an interview I wanted to share with you guys from back in November when Crystal Dynamics was the focus of a documentary highlighting their 30-year anniversary in the gaming industry, and I'll have the full link to the video in the description, but I wanted to focus on the segment centered around Avengers obviously, and you'll get to hear from the head of studio Scott Amos, as well as design director Jason Bada, as they go over several challenges the game faced out of the gate and explain why they're still committed to delivering more content in the future. Hopefully you guys find a bit of encouragement from this, and as always, let me know your thoughts down below, but with that said, let's jump into it.
Enix Group, Crystal Dynamics had established themselves as frontrunners when it came to making narrative-led AAA games. So when the opportunity came to use those skills on the Marvel franchise, they jumped at the chance. From the off, this project was going to be a challenge, requiring them to sharpen their core competencies and also get to grips with a few areas of design they were new to. But when the COVID-19 pandemic struck 5 months before the game's release, it didn't exactly make this challenge any easier.
If you look at the origin of the relationship between Marvel and Square Enix at just a holistic level, David Anfossi, who's the head of Montreal, actually first came with the idea of like, maybe we should work with Marvel, because at that point, you got to think this is early in what we now think of as the MCU, these 10 years of Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before that happened, like we're in those first few years of that, so David had said, hey, what if we did some kind of deal with Marvel? And then Daryl Gallagher, who was head of studios, started mapping out a plan of what could we do, how big is big, how many IP, how would we make the different studios own different franchises. And so that was a much bigger conversation that then took about a year and a half to calm down into, well, let's talk about 2 franchises. Let's talk about a couple of games that made sense, and that became Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers. And for us, it was, okay, this was Crystal, this was IDOS, and this was Square talking with Marvel and negotiating like what could we do, what made sense, how do we want to do this. But we never wanted to make the games of the movies or the games of the comics. We wanted to make our original take on these iconic characters that was an amalgam of all these different pieces. But we also was imperative of what differentiates us. What can we do that's going to be so clearly different that it's not the game of the movie or the show or the comic? And that became Kamala Khan. That became this new face, this character. We know something about strong female heroines leading the story. We're like, that could be fun for us. How do we put that in there?
Avengers was an interesting one. When we took it on, and the original pitch that I think we discussed with Marvel, make a very Tomb Raider-like game, but within the Marvel universe. Something very linear, very single character focused, so you would play through as one character and then switch to a different character at a different spot in the game. The earliest prototype we made, you would sort of play through a level as starting off as Iron Man, and then you would switch to Captain America, and then you would switch back at one point. And so we had this sort of ping-ponging and tag teaming of characters that would sort of keep in constant communication through radio chatter, and it was, you know, it was much more a traditional Crystal Dynamics third-person single-player action-adventure game. As we started to develop it, it felt like, oh, we were playing kind of like, oh, it's the Iron Man game and the Captain America game and the Black Widow game, but it didn't feel teamy enough. And so in the same way that with Tomb Raider, we went through a lot of ideation and trying a lot of things before we could sort of focus on like, what is the core of the Avengers franchise? And then for us, one of those key pillars became team. And then every time we would talk about like, well, we're gonna do a single player game, it just didn't resonate well. And so at some point we were like, do we really wanna go outside of our comfort zone this far and build a multiplayer game, which we hadn't done since Snowblind. That was a big turning point for the game where it started to take on the shape that it became ultimately, but also one that was a lot of people were very hesitant about because of what it meant for the game and the scope of the game.
A lot of expectation on any new Tomb Raider game, but with something like Marvel, that's a whole new universe of expectation on it. What were some of the biggest challenges you had during the process of that development?
I think it's funny, the same word that I'd throw back at you is expectations, right? At that point, movies were evolving, the characters, the size, the scope, the bombast of what's happening inside of that world. Even in the comics themselves, we are trying to tell, as Crystal, the story that very much looks through this lens of this girl from Jersey who's just learning who she is, that her world's been turned upside down, that all the Avengers criminals and what's going on. So for us, managing that and telling what turned into be a great hero origin story with a lot of characters that she unifies, but setting player expectations. Like if you think back to the E3 when we announced, it was literally a month after Endgame. And so now MCU is just kind of wrapping up and this, oh my God, these are the characters I love. And when people look at it, we're like, these aren't the same actors, these aren't the same characters. Like, yeah, we've always extended that, we've always intended that, we've always talked about it, but we hadn't done a great job of managing some of those expectations. So to be honest, people showed up like, this doesn't feel like what I just saw, like that's intended, it's okay. And there's things that we could have done differently, and looking back, things that we could have managed that expectation much better. We loved the choice we made because it let us do an original take on these characters and let us explore spaces nobody else had. And that was really one of the biggest challenges for us, was just getting that messaging right and then getting players to see like, no, really, trust us, this is going to be fun, but you have to be willing to come with us on a different journey.
We kept building upon one engine, and that engine was a engine that was a single player engine for the last 15 years. Previously we had built Snowblind on the Go engine, which was the multiplayer engine. And so converting our Tomb Raider engine to support multiplayer was a huge undertaking. And so it took a lot of hard work by a lot of very talented people to be able to make the engine do that. But as soon as we got 2 players playing together, 3 players playing together, and really were able to see what it was like to play the game as part of a team, it's when we really were like, okay, that was worth it. We made the right decision.
So if you think back over the last now 3 years, like March 13th, 2020, everybody out, but having to work from home from a studio that's used to being in a facility next to each other, being able to QA and user test, we weren't allowed to take dev kits or test kits home. Like it was a legal thing that you weren't supposed to take stuff off site, it needed to be secured. So we had to work through so many new challenges. Oh my gosh, we have to make the biggest thing we've ever made as a game, the hardest thing we've ever made as a game, because we've never made it before, with, at the end of the day, 10, now 11 different heroes, and had to make them feel different, had to make them look different, had to build the content, had to build the online component for co-op. All of these pieces. Now through the production pathway, you get past the pandemic and actually get to launch. We had tested it, we were very confident, we launched when we thought it was the right time to launch, we felt good about it. We're like, oh my God, okay, what the hell, we didn't know this, we didn't know this. And so we had a lot of dirt to clean off of us, to be honest. It was a humbling experience as Crystal, to go out there from what we're used to doing for Tomb Raider and for Rise, and now getting kind of, this cold water splash, and I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta pick up the pace and fix things. So we kept the team dedicated and focused for adding the post-launch heroes, for adding Wakanda, for adding all this content and fixing all these things as we went that we didn't know were there until we had literally millions of people playing it. Because testing in a pandemic, getting the feedback, like you only had so much you could do. Like even today, we're still fighting every day. What new things can we add to kind of raise the profile and elevation and feed the characters' needs? Because the players every day are asking us for more stuff. That's a good thing, right? Folks look at that and like, oh, what's going to happen with this game? Like every day we get asked for more content. That's what you want from a fan base, is to say, yep, okay, you guys have now gotten this done. I want more. But what else could I want?